I find myself at the wonderful moment of starting to build out new campaigns. And it gave me some time and chatting with some folks on Discord server and looking about previous recommendations that I have, like in Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, and thinking about what it means to build out a campaign and what the process is like for that. Right? For prepping a session, I have the 8 steps from Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, right? 8 steps that you can follow. You can check them out to prep an actual session. But what is a similar process for actually beginning a campaign? What are the things we do to begin a campaign? The recommendations that I have in Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master still work, but I think we can kind of spread them out and sort of thinking about them in particular phases that we have. This is almost certainly going to be a 2-part show, one where we talk about parts of some of the initial campaign stuff, and then one where we talk about more of the outside world building stuff that happens later. To begin with, we build a campaign seed. You're sitting down, you're starting to think about a new campaign you're running. What is the seed of that campaign? And the campaign seed is the materials that you need in order to prep a campaign 1 sheet for your players and to get you ready for your session 0. That is what you're leading for. So you're not fleshing out the entire world, right? You're just getting enough information to be able to bring it to your players and to give you and your players a good idea of what you're doing. All of the steps in this are intended to do the right thing at the right time, to do the minimum amount of stuff that you need to do, to leave yourself lots of freedom to let things grow. And that's why this structure is built the way it is. So your campaign seed, starting with, you got to pick a system and you got to pick a setting. Right? What is the system that you're going to be running for your game, and what is that setting? This actually probably takes place before you even start thinking about a session 0. You want to talk to your players and say like, hey, I'm thinking about running a game in Dragonbane. What do you think about Dragonbane? Let me tell you a little bit about it, and kind of giving them the hook and the pitch before you do a session 0. And that way they get an idea of what you're talking about. And a lot of times, particularly if you use the sales technique of, hey, let's just try it for a couple of sessions and see how it feels. They're like, sure, a couple of sessions, I'll try anything, right? You don't say like, this is going to be the game we're going to play for the next 6 months. They're going to want to know a lot more about it, or they're going to want to do it with a system they've already understood. But instead you could say, hey, I'd like to try this for a couple of sessions and see how it goes. A lot of times that pitch works, and you might find out that after a couple of sessions, you're like, yeah, maybe this isn't the game for us, right? Maybe it's not really working out. So that gives you idea. But you have to pick a system and you have to pick a setting. What kind of game are you going to play, and where is that game going to be set? A lot of times the system and setting work together. Next is your campaign hook. What is the single sentence that you can write down that if you were going to tell people what is your campaign about, you want to give them a campaign hook? What is the hook that is going to bring them in? You and your fellow adventurers are traveling into the secluded Misty Vale to help protect the adventurers and hunters of the realm from the dangers in the forest. Right? That is an example of a campaign hook that I'm using for my Dragonbane game. So, what is that one sentence that helps you with the hook? If you want to see an example of more hooks, Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, I have a bunch of campaign hooks in it. But you come up with that hook. The next step is coming out with the truths of your system. So we're going to take a look at the one-pager, and I'll get into building a one-pager for your players. But the one-pager actually has a lot of the material that we want. And I'm going to use it for the Lure of Hylaeus, which is my Beast Feast campaign that I'm going to be running using Daggerheart. So the campaign hook is, when an ancient lure drawing monsters away from the village of Elmore begins to fail, local heroes must travel into the endless depths of Plovar Caves to fix it and find something delicious along the way. That is my one sentence campaign hook, right? That's the one thing that kind of drives, gives players a little bit of an idea of what's going on here, gives you a general feeling of like what the campaign is about. So it works. Then you have your truths. I used to call them the 6 truths, but a lot of times there's only 4 or 5. So it's like 3 to 6 truths, but we're going to just call them the truths of your campaign. What are the things that make this campaign different than all of the other campaigns and all of the other worlds that your players might be familiar with? These are player focused, so they are not secrets that you are holding back. They are information that the players and their characters would know about the world. And all of these things are driven to kind of show your players what this game is about, and also to sell it to them, right? Give them interesting things that they go, this is what makes this kind of cool. So the 5 truths of Elmore in my Lure of Hylaeus games. Elmore is a peaceful village. The quiet, rusty village of Elmore is full of bakers and weavers, farmers and cobblers with ne'er a sword in sight. By the way, I got this from the Beast Feast campaign, the campaign seed that is inside the Daggerheart book. So you can go, if you're running a published setting, you can take a lot of information from that published setting and put it into your one-pager. Farmers and Converse with ne'er-do-well a sword in sight. The villagers are more concerned about not mucking up their contribution to the yearly Stew Pot Festival than the dangers outside their walls. I abbreviated this also because I wanted to make sure that that it fit well. The lure of Hylaeus is failing. Long ago, Hylaeus, the forest mage, created a lure drawing dangerous creatures into the caverns. For centuries, this kept any harm from coming to the village of Elmore. Now the lure is fading. As dangerous beasts rise out of Plovar caves, the villagers call for heroes who might descend into the caves and save their people. The Plovar caves are endless. The Plovar caves stretch on for hundreds of miles, deeper and more sprawling than even the most adventurous explorer could map in their lifetimes. Different biomes are home to unique creatures, wondrous flora, and valuable treasures left behind by adventurers past. Beasts are dangerous and delicious. The magical lure draws beasts and blooms from all over the world. Many are dangerous and delicious. While any sentient creature is off limits, many wild creatures and dangerous plants hide delicious ingredients for wondrous dishes. Good and nefarious delvers explore Plovar caves. You are not alone in your explorations of the Plovar caves. Others seek to help restore the lure, find forgotten treasures, and locate delectable ingredients for their favorite dishes. Others seek to take what they want in the lawless depths. So those are like the 5 truths. Again, these are player-focused truths that I do as part of the building a campaign seed. So now I have my truths. Now, an optional thing is you can think about factions. Sometimes it's nice, and again, this is all focused on what's the material you need to bring to your players at a session 0. So this is all about bringing material to your players. So you might decide that you want to introduce one of several patrons. I've done this in my Eberron game. I've done it in some other game, my City of Arches game, same way of like, hey, here are some factions, and what one do you think as a group you would like to go for? And you kind of build those factions around alignments. Do you go with the shady relic dealer? Do you go with the priest who's trying to make the world a better place? Do you go with the spy master who wants to protect people, but ends justifies the means kind of way? So you can build out separate factions, and you might want to do it here if your intention is to bring those factions or patrons to the characters during your session 0 for them to select from. Alternatively, you can skip this. And you can instead introduce factions later on and let the players join a faction once they've actually had a chance to play. You don't really need it, but it's one possible way you could do it. Another consideration here is how much player-driven campaign building do you want to do during your session 0? A game like Daggerheart actually has a fair bit of player-driven campaign planning, but instead of just saying like, yes, I want to do it, think about the questions you want to ask the players, right? Like, what would the name of your adventure, of the Adventurers Guild in this town be like? Or what other sort of factions? Think about, you want to ask leading questions. You want to ask questions that are leading to specific answers rather than just kind of having this like wide open field and everybody's running off in all kinds of different directions with things. You still have a campaign you're running, and you still want to ask those specific questions to help drive your players to answer specific things about the world and know that the world is going to be cohesive at the end of that. You'll want to do that before you have your session 0. If you're going to ask questions like that. And then you can prepare a short adventure. Usually 1 to 3 scenes is enough. You're not going to have a lot of time during your session 0 to run an adventure, but you want enough of one to kind of get people started and get people playing the game. Usually like one good meaty scene can do it, or make 2 or 3 smaller scenes together. That's probably all you need. You can use the 8 steps for that adventure if you want. You can also leave parts of that adventure blank if you're going to be using information from the character development and from other sort of player-driven story elements to design it. You can sort of like not really care about what faction the monsters are tied to, or there are bandits, but you don't really say who the bandits are because you're actually going to figure out like the names of the bandit groups or what the information about the Thieves Guild and everything like that. So now that you've done your campaign seed, the next step is writing a campaign handout. Now, the campaign handout, about half of the material that you developed in the previous one is stuff that you're going to put in your handout, but there's other things you're going to have in your handout that you didn't develop in the previous section. And this is an example of a one-page handout, right? The one that I was showing for the Lure of Hylaeus. I already covered that the handout is, of course, going to have your campaign seed. Again, this is a sales pitch to your players to join, and it's going to have your truths so that the players have enough information to start thinking about what kind of characters they would want to play in this game. Then you can add another section called like your character in. Like what is the information that the players need to design a character that's going to fit well into this campaign? So an example in this one is your character in Elmore. Your character begins in the village of Elmore. The village counts on you and a handful of others to delve into the Plovar caves, fight back the monstrous hordes within, help restore the lure, and perhaps find some delicious morsels along the way. Your motivations might include treasure. The ruins of ancient civilizations are said to reside in the depths of the Plovar caves. Delectables. The exotic ingredients found within the Plovar caves are sure to delight you and those you prepare for. Altruism. As a resident of Elmore, you take it upon yourself to protect the village from the beasts below. And exploration. Great mysteries reside deep in the caves. What wonders might you find? And then this is an important one. Whatever your background and motivation, you band with your fellow adventurers to delve into Plovar caves and save the village of Elmore from the threats of the monsters within. That is the central bond of the characters for this campaign. This seems heavy-handed, and it is a little heavy-handed. The nice thing is it avoids all of the problems of my character doesn't like caves. My character doesn't want to go to caves. My character likes to hang out in the village. Great. Make another character. Make one who does like going into caves, right? That the character, if you're going to be running a game about characters going into caves and fighting monsters, you want to make sure your characters actually want to go in caves and fight monsters or are motivated to do so. Maybe they hate going into the caves, but they have to anyway. Whatever, they're going. And they're working with the other characters, right? The other one is like, they're not lone wolves. We don't want lone wolf RPG players. We want people that want to be in a group. So I feel like it's important to be pretty heavy-handed about saying like, the character you build wants to do these things with the group. Right? I think that's pretty good. So character creation, if you have any special rules for character creation, this is where you do it. You can tell if you've overdone it, if you start to bleed over to more than one page. You're like, maybe I have too many house rules, right? You know, it happens, but you want to be careful about it. In this one, it's very simple. The campaign uses the standard character building rules for Daggerheart, including all classes, ancestries, and communities. Whatever community you have in the past, you now reside in Helmore Village. Instead of the standard equipment, you can select equipment from the Beast Feast starting equipment on page 275 of the Daggerheart core book, right? Because it's a different. And then we have our safety tools. And I have two sets of safety tools. One, pause for a minute. Anytime during the campaign, anybody can say, let's pause for a minute. They can ask a question about the campaign. They can ask that we move past a particular subject or topic. They can ask people to catch up. They can make sure that everybody else is cool. The point of pause for a minute is everybody breaks out of character, talks about something that's going on, and make sure that everybody's cool with it, and then dropping back into character. It's sort of my version of an X card. I like it because it also works well in online play as well as in-person play. And then you have content lines and veils, right? What are the lines that you're not going to cross in a campaign? What are the things that you're not going to cover in the campaign at all? And then what are some things that you may cover in the campaign, but you're going to cover them off screen? Examples of the veils for this one are like, there's comic gore and consensual sexual contact could be veiled off screen, but we're not going to have it as sort of a main part of it. And, there's going to be, I'm actually going to alter this a little bit because there's like comic violence and gore because it's about like eating monsters and stuff like this. But if you've watched like Delicious in Dungeon, that's kind of the level that's going on in there. And then I have hard lines around things like non-consensual sexual contact or harassment, PC-initiated torture, in-world or out-of-world racism, violence towards domesticated animals, violence towards children, misogyny, transphobia, homophobia, or non-consensual PC violence, theft, or betrayal. Eating ingredients from those with a distinct personhood is also off limits. In this case, we have to kind of say, yeah, there's a lot of like eating. You're not eating orcs, right? You're not eating sentient creatures. You're eating, beasts, right? Beasts are the key here. So that's an example of like the safety tools that I put in my guide and make it clear about what the content is allowed and what content is not. When you've been playing with a group a while, they're going to be very familiar with this kind of stuff. They already know that that's sort of how to behave. But sometimes if you're running with a new group, if you have new players, you want to be explicit about the things that you want to have in your game and the things you do not want to have in your game. So that is the one pager. At that point, you're ready to run your session 0. Right? So now you've got all the material together that you want to run your session 0. So what do you do during the session 0? First thing you do is you go over the one pager. You probably delivered the one pager a couple days before the session 0, not too far ahead so they don't build a bunch of characters around it, but just enough that they've had a chance to read it when they show up. But you go over it anyway. Cover the material that's on there so everybody's aware of what's on there. Print out a bunch of copies and hand it out to them or send it to them digitally. Then you build characters together, right? Who are the characters? What are you building together? So you build your characters together and everybody's building their characters alongside everybody else. That way they're picking things that matter. They're starting to think about how their characters work together. You know that you're going to have a group that synergizes well, right? That's an important thing that's going on here. If you did decide to ask some questions to fill out the rest of the world, now is the time to do that as well. What are the questions you can ask the players to fill in parts of the rest of the world? Adventuring guilds, religions and pantheons, temples, locations in a town, right? What are the areas that you want to have them? But make sure that you're asking specific guided questions to get the answers that you actually want. If you decided to include multiple patrons or factions for them to select from, now is their time to select their patron or their faction as well. And then once you've asked your questions, once you've got characters built, once you've chosen patrons or factions, once you've built out other parts of the world, now you can run your short adventure. And again, you're not going to get through a lot. Maybe you have an hour, right? So you're probably just going to run a quick, maybe one scene about what's going on. Ideally, you want to run the kind of adventure that's going to show off some of the components that make this campaign unique. But generally, you want to get players rolling some dice so they're having some fun, even though the next session is really when you're going to get into the game in earnest. But I find that running a short adventure really helps. So that's about half of what we need to do for our world building. We've got our initial campaign seed, where we kind of outlined components of the world. We built our campaign one-pager, and we gave it to our players so they have an understanding of what's going on in the game. And we ran our session 0, where they built their characters together. They got their setting material together. You're starting to put this together. The next part, which we will cover in the next video, is filling out the rest of your lazy campaign. Now that you've had that session 0, now that that's running, what's next? What are the other components of the game that you fill out? How do you start running and prepping adventures in this setting? And how do you fill out the larger world if you're building a world on your own? We're going to cover that in the next video. So I recently did a video where we started talking about building lazy campaigns. What are the things that we GMs need to do to kind of get ourselves ready to build campaigns from scratch, or build campaigns that we're going to run with our players for new RPGs, new longer form RPGs. In the last video, I talked about building your campaign seed, choosing your systems, doing your hooks, getting your truths, coming up with factions if you need them, coming up with the questions that you want to offer to players for world building if you need to do that, and preparing a short adventure. Also, writing a campaign handout for your players so that you have something to give to them so you can kind of pitch them on the campaign, show them where their character fits into the campaign, talk about those truths, go over house rules, and go over safety tools. And I talked about running a session 0, where you actually go over the one-pager, you build your characters together, you choose your patron or faction, you build the campaign setting together, and maybe if you have time, you run your short adventure. Today, we're going to talk about what to do after that. So now you've had your session 0, you've gone through all of the stuff, and now you know who the characters are. The players have come up with some interesting aspects of the world if you did some kind of character or player-driven world narrative. And now you're ready to start doing some other stuff. So what do you do now? What's next on your list? And there's really a couple of paths that you're going to take. So the one path is to flesh out the rest of your campaign world that you need to run the next few sessions. You don't have to build out the whole campaign world totally. You don't need to build everything out now. But you do need to fill out what you received so that you're ready to have enough material on hand to start running sessions and running adventures for your group. And this gets to a thing, and there are different ways to do this, but I have a way that I prefer, and I have a way that I recommend, and that has been recommended to me by other GMs as well, that I'm going to call spiral campaign development. Spiral campaign development essentially says your campaign starts with the characters as the focal point of your campaign and spirals outwards. So you don't have to build your whole world. You don't build 72 continents. Or 12 continents with 72 different empires. You don't have to build a 50,000-year history and 7 different pantheons for all these different cultures. You only need to worry about the stuff that's where the characters are and what's directly around them. This is true whether you're using a published campaign setting or you're coming up with your own homebrew campaign setting. The last time I did polls on this topic, about half of people were building homebrew campaign worlds and half of them were using published campaign worlds. But either way, that spiral campaign development works. A very common problem that people have with published settings is it's so vast and so big, how can I possibly get my head around all of this whole thing? And the answer is you don't have to. Pick where they're going to start and build outwards from there. Right? If you have the whole Forgotten Realms, start in the little halfling town of Cormorp in the center of Cormyr and build around there. You don't have to worry about what's going on in the deserts. You don't have to worry about what's going on in Icewind Dale. You don't have to worry about Calimshan. You don't have to worry about Thay. All you have to worry about is what's going on in the area that you're going to use. And that's called spiral development. Start where they are and build outwards. So that means figuring out where the game is going to start. right? What's that starting location? Often this is like a small town or a village. Sometimes it could be a specific area of a larger city, like a specific neighborhood of a larger city. And you want to start to fill that place out. Now, you could have your players help fill this out if you do that sort of character-driven or player-driven narrative of like, hey, name some of the locations that might exist in this starting area, or name a location that your character likes to go to, or a location that you think would be useful for the adventures to come to head. Or you can come up with them yourself. But even then, when you're thinking about what locations you want in your starting location, think about the ones that are going to help you go on adventures. Where do they stay when they need a rest? Where do they go buy equipment? Where do they go to talk to people that are tied to their classes? If you ever need to figure out like what locations to fill out what specific locations to fill out a larger location with, like a town, look at the characters and say, what place would this character want to go to? If they're a paladin or a cleric, you probably need a temple. If they're a barbarian or a fighter, maybe they need an adventurer's guild. If they're a bard or a rogue, maybe they need a seedy bar with a good stage, right? If they are a sorcerer or a wizard, maybe they need a wizard's tower or a sage's place or an old witch's hut that they like to go to. So think about the locations that are going to be useful to the characters. This is really that exercise of spiraling out from the characters. What are the locations they're going to need to have adventures? Those are the ones you need to fill out. You don't need to fill out everything. You need to fill out the ones that give them what they need to go on adventures. So that's really, and then one thing I like to do is add a fantastic feature. What is an interesting feature of this town that makes it unique among all of the others, right? In the town of White Sparrow, in my book Fantastic Adventures, there was a giant stone hand that was reaching out of the ground. Nobody knew where it came from. Nobody knew if it was part of a larger thing. It was just a giant hand sticking out of the ground. I thought that was a fun feature. A lot of people kind of hung on that feature, so it really worked well. Then you could start to spiral out a little more and start to give yourself some of the variables to help build your campaign. 3 villains, quests, and goals and quests. So I like to have 3 villains. Sometimes I have like a short-term villain, a medium-term villain, and a long-term villain. Sometimes they work for each other. Sometimes they're totally separate. And each of these villains that you kind of come up with, and a villain doesn't have to be an actual entity. It could be something like a storm or a coming meteor or some kind of big catastrophic event that's coming along. That could work out. Who are these 3 villains that you have? What are quests? What are the goals that those villains are working on? And what 3 quests are they currently working on to accomplish those goals? This is actually pretty meaty, and it might be more than you really need for your first initial sessions, but it's a fun way to build out the world in a way that can be directly relevant to the players, because those quests are things the characters are going to see moving on, right? These are the actions of three big actors and the things that they're doing, and the players are going to be witnessing these, and it's really what makes the world come alive. So that really works. A next dirty trick is having a faction list. I'm a huge fan of building a faction list. Faction lists could be gods, historic figures, your villains, they're big icons, heroes, bits of history, but you want to have a list of things that you can roll onto flavor, items and monuments and temples and locations and NPCs that can tie them to the factions that are in your world. You don't need to have a giant book of the whole history. You could just list like 10 factions. Maybe some of them are gods, maybe some of them are heroes, maybe some of them are villains. These are ways to kind of add the texture of your unique campaign to the items that show up in that campaign, whether they're monsters or NPCs or monuments or anything like that. You don't have to finish your whole faction list now, and obviously it can evolve over the campaign, but it can really work well. Then you need your 3 adventure locations. What are 3 locations in the area that the characters might go to on adventures, and what quests might take them to those areas? Right? And this is where you can use random tables. I have a whole bunch in the Lazy GM's reference document, the Lazy GM's resource document, where you can find locations, you can flavor those locations, you can use your faction list to flavor them, you can drop some interesting monsters on them, and then come up with a reason why the characters need to go there. And I have a big quest list that's in that document as well that says that they're going there to recover something or to save somebody or to find something or to kill an evil foe or whatever. Come up with a reason why they'd want to go to those. And those are the things you're actually going to drop in front of your players when it's time for them to go on a quest. So that's really the next steps for fleshing out your campaign after you've had your first session 0. There's a lot of stuff that's in there, but once you have that stuff, you can use the material that you developed in that part to kind of build all the adventures that are coming on out. So what about running lazy campaign adventures? What are the things that you actually need to do now to build the adventures that you're going to run for your game? Well, that's where the 8 steps of Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master comes in. Now that you've got the material, now that you know information about the characters, now that you have information about the world and what's going on around those characters, now you can start doing your prep. Who are the characters and what do they have that's tied to what's going on? What's your strong start? What scenes are you going to do? What secrets and clues can they discover? What locations might they go to? What NPCs might they interact with? What monsters might they fight? And what treasures might they acquire? Those are the 8 steps from Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master. I mostly did that out of my own head. I'm pretty happy with that. So that's about finishing up fleshing out the rest of your 8 steps. Now it's time to just start doing your prep like you would for anything else. You can focus on your quests, right? My favorite quest model is someone wants you to go somewhere to do something. It's a very simple quest model, right? You build your quests out there. You offer 3 quests, ideally at the end of a session, so that players know what they're going on, and so that you know what one they're going to pick so that you can prepare that. And think about the character is acting and the world reacts to the actions of the characters. And that's how your campaign builds. The campaign can evolve through the eyes of your villains. So you know that the villains are also doing things. They're trying to accomplish things. What are they doing? And how are they reacting to the actions of the characters? That really becomes the larger story that's at play. But all of it kind of comes down to running your adventures. Now, you might have to flesh out your world even more. This is sort of a big optional step. What else do you need to do to build out your larger world? The first thing to understand is your players probably don't care about your world as much as you do. So you have to be prepared for that. You might have, and this is a very common thing I see with new GMs, is they have huge ideas for vast worlds. They want to dive in so deep. They have huge histories. Because we don't have a lot of creative outlets in our lives. And suddenly we find ourselves with a creative outlet and we want to fill it with everything that we've been dying to do for our whole lives. No one cares. Your players don't care. No one else cares. I'm sorry to tell you. I hate to be the one to tell you. No one cares. So that really means you want to be building things that are useful to the game you're going to be running for the players who are going to be focused on their characters. So could you build a history? Yes, but build a practical history. Build a history that matters for the things that the characters are doing, the things that they're going to discovering. The history can be built out through those secrets and clues that you're offering up in each of the sessions games, rather than building a giant Bible of the whole history of everything that's ever happened. Building a practical pantheon. Start with, who are the gods the characters need? Who are the gods the characters oppose? You don't need to have a huge pantheon of 28 gods. You can just pick the ones that the players have chosen. One of the things I like for Daggerheart is I'm building the gods based on the domains of the various powers that the characters have. That's really practical. So practical is the word of the day for this, right? Build the stuff that you need to run the sessions that you're running. That's the stuff that you really need. Have factions, include factions. I like to have 2 good guy factions, 2 shady factions, and 2 evil factions, right? These can kind of augment your villains. Maybe the villains are part of the factions, or the factions work for the villains or something like that. You don't need a lot more. And all of those factions are ones that the characters can interact with. Again, you're focused on those characters you're building outwards. Instead of building your own crazy magic system, just use the default magic system for the game system that you're using, right? Try not to get fancy. Somebody else spent a lot of time thinking about that magic system. I'm sure you really like your spell point based system. If you really want that, find a game that uses spell points, or just live with the magic system as it has. Again, people don't care. And if you're changing the rules on people, it's going to be really tough. Build a useful economy. What kind of economy do you actually need? There can be a lot of fun that you can have with an economy. I'm having a lot of fun messing around with the economy in my Dragon Empire game. But you want it to be an economy that is directly relevant to the goals of the campaign and to the drive of the players and the drive of their characters and things like that. The main step there is build what you need. Build what you need to run sessions for your group. That's what you're focused on. Don't worry about filling out everything else that's not going to come out. Don't build campaigns 5 years in the future. Don't build out huge histories no one's ever going to figure out. Build from those 8 steps. Build for the things that you need to have in front of your players, because that's the stuff you actually need to run your games.